Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the study session of the Litchfield Elementary School Governing Board. Today is Tuesday, September 22nd, and I call this meeting to order. First on our agenda is A2, district properties updates and status updates with Dan. Thank you, Dan.
Madam President, governing board members, Superintendent Gunning. I put together a PowerPoint giving you an idea of where we have properties that we do not have any schools built, or it's point property, or properties that have been set aside for us in development. So we don't have title or anything like that, but we have agreements with the developer that it could be a school at some point. That we'll discuss: Thomas Road and 144th Avenue, Zanjero Trails, North Perryville Road and West Glendale Avenue. That's the north one. Zanjero Trails South at North 189th Avenue and West Missouri Avenue. And then Thomas Road and 191st Avenue. Here's a district map indicating with the yellow stars, or gold stars, gives you an idea where they are across the district. Some of the factors that I look at specifically for construction, as far as the readiness goes for each property: student population growth potential, what's around it, walking distance to the school, shovel readiness, ownership status, whether we own the property or not, roads that are developed in the area, utilities such as sewer, water, gas, power, and telephone data utilities. Thomas Road and 144th Avenue has been on the books for quite a few years. Some advantages to it: walking distance around students. It's completely surrounded by fully developed neighborhood. There's an opportunity for K on the east side of the district in that location. Shovel ready. There's fields already complete that we own and maintain. There's roads. It's fully developed inside of the development. All the utilities are already set. The title is in the district name and is currently being maintained by the district. Some of the disadvantages that we've talked about in the past is the student population growth potential. There's not room for too many homes to be built in the area. There's another indication about where it's at on the map for the district. Here's some photos of the property. As you can see, there's fields in the background with lights for athletic purposes. The field currently, where you see nothing but dirt, is where the school would be located. Currently, it's just brush and dirt. There's a small parking lot that's utilized by the people that use the fields. This is a Google Earth shot. It's a little hard to see on the screen over there, but you probably can see it on your computer. What you see kind of highlighted in that area with some footprints is basically Verado Heritage or Blinn Soto template on how we build those campuses with the two-story, just to kind of give you a feel of what the property could. Not saying that we would build that particular school, but what the property could entail as far as the number of buildings and amenities that are around it. As you can see on the left or the west side is a fully developed field with grass, baseball diamond. It's currently used a lot for soccer practice and soccer games, things like that. Zanjero Trails, the north area of the district, North Perryville Road and West Glendale Avenue, up on the far north end of our district. Some advantages: population growth potential. The entire area is scheduled for homes all the way surrounding it. The property must be accepted by 2036 for our agreement, so we do not own the property yet. There is anticipated development in the next several years. Zanjero Trails is a moving development that is currently active, and they're clearing land, putting up homes all the way around the area. The property size and layout has not yet been designed by the developer, so we have the opportunity to work with the developer on the size and the layout of the property because they haven't actually broke ground in the area. Disadvantages if we were to build it today. Walking distance, right now there are no homes directly around it within a mile without crossing a major road. The roads don't exist and the utilities don't exist right now. We do have had active conversations with the developer. They're looking to move forward very soon. There's a little indication of where it's at, a little easier to see where it is in the district. As you can see, the land is bare. It's raw desert, basically. Where it's at now, there's no roads, no homes, nothing directly where the property is that they're looking to give to us, donate to us. The San Harold Trail is what I'm calling south, is at north 189th Avenue in West Missouri. So kind of a little south of the property we were just talking about. The advantages is population growth potential all the way around. There's lots of homes being built under construction. Must be accepted by 2036, similar to the north property. There's walking distance. There's homes surrounding the property now. The roads are complete. The utilities are complete to the property. Some of the disadvantages, the property size is a little less conforming to our K-8 model. It's a much smaller property, which limits us on playground space, running space. There's a field directly north of it, that the intent was that we would share the field with the developer, with the community, similar to you might see at Broad Heritage, and at Maple Pageant, where we have the field that's next to us that we kind of share. There are disadvantages to that, where it's not as conforming to what we would be looking for. And parking would be very limited just because of the size of the property. It's much smaller.
Dan, I have a question for you before you move on. You're mentioning broader heritage, and then here you're mentioning the K-8 model. What is the strategy behind K-8 versus a middle school versus elementary? I mean, they all have different layouts. So are you just using the K-8? Is that the biggest model? So you're...
I use the K-8 because it incorporates all aspects of the construction side. I'm not looking at it for where the students are going to come from, how many kids are going to be in there. But from a construction side, I have to include a lot more amenities when you're doing a K-8. As an example, I need a baseball and a softball field if I do a K-8 to meet the requirements for Title IX and things like that.
Okay.
That's why I look at it as a K-8. It doesn't need to be. It could be elementary, it could be a middle. But I look at it in, I don't want to say the worst case scenario, but for me, in the construction
The hardest to build, right? Yeah.
in the construction side, it's the hardest or most complicated.
Understand. Thank you.
Here it is, the stars circling around there, so you can see where it's at. This is from the developer that we received the plans of what the area looks like now. What you see there in the bottom half is basically made pageant, so you can kind of get a feel of dimension for it. The north end is the park. You kind of see a baseball field right there. The developer actually didn't build a baseball field into their park, so that would be an amenity that we would need to include. We're required to provide a baseball field. We would need to make some adjustments to the property. Plus that north property, that north field is not fenced off. So students running around playing during regular day would be more difficult. But that kind of gives you an idea where it is in the neighborhood. This is a Google Earth shot of the property as it's shown probably about, I think it's about 9 months ago. So you see some empty lots around there. Most all of those are already filled in. The roads are complete. So a lot of those empty properties that you see, they're already have homes developed onto it. In the light blue is the actual property line that would be owned by the school district. So you can kind of see where those outside boundaries are for the property that we could use. There's a couple photos that I took very recently, just kind of showing It is raw dirt, just shrubbery, brush, kind of growing on the property now. And then the large field that's next to it, very well maintained by the developer, the HOA was taking care of that. Thomas Road and 191st Avenue is property that we've owned for many, many decades. It houses support services, Scott Libby, white tanks already, along with a lot of property that's still undeveloped that we still have title to. Advantages is centralized location for growth. Roads are complete, utilities are there as far as power goes. Some disadvantages is walking distance is limited. There are no homes that are directly around the property that you could really walk to very well. Utilities, there's no sewer tap currently except for across I-10. So it'd probably be like on a septic type system, which is common. A lot of Scott Libby's on septic, support services on septic tank type system. But there is sewer tap issues that we have to deal with, and availability of water. What's available from the current water utility company, that's there, it's very limited, so there might need to be some design implications regarding water. It is, as far as the district map is concerned, where it's located. A few photos of the current property. You can see it's mostly bare desert and farmland. More shots of some of the area that's farmland and some of the area that's raw desert. Currently, it's not used for any purposes for the district. This next shot is from the assessor, kind of showing you where our property is. On the bottom of the diagram there, on that blue line, that mark, that's our southern boundary of our property that we currently own. It has that mark to it. Right where it is at the bottom there, that's about Encanto. We own basically from Thomas, basically to Encanto, from Perryville all the way over to 191st. There is one little piece of property that's owned by the telephone company, just directly south of Scott Libby, but it's there's no issue there. So you can kind of see that there's a very large amount of property right there at Thomas and Perryville and 191st. Those are all of our properties that currently do not have school status. Any questions?
My question is in regards to the purpose of this presentation. Is this strictly something informational that you think we need to know about periodically, like once a year, or are we supposed to be considering this for some sort of decision making?
Just strictly information so you know what is out there. It's not something that you'll probably see on our website. It's not something that we go over very often. It's just something so you know that we do have properties out there that we own and maintain or is donated to us. Strictly information.
Okay, and there's no changes that need to happen with these or anything. We're just in a steady state right now until the board would decide if we have sufficient growth that we would need to go for a bond and build a new school and that whole process. Okay, excellent. Thank you. I appreciate your presentation, Dan.
I have a couple of questions, Dan. Sorry, just out of major curiosity. The property that's there off of Perryville next to the support services thing here, is that, can we change the zone on that, or is that only zoned for education school? Education purposes or whatever, I don't know what that's something, so I'm just curious. You know.
I can kind of delve into that. Technically, legally, you can build a school anywhere. Zoning doesn't prohibit building schools. You can build an industrial park, you can build in a commercial area, you can build in residential. So as far as zoning goes, the district and the school districts in general are not obligated to follow any zoning rules. So there's no reason to need to change any type of zoning or anything like that to build a school.
But if you want to build something else, can you change zoning inside of school property?
Yeah, it's just a process you go through the city. They can change zoning from anything everywhere. It's a planning process that you go through.
Can we build a gas station on that corner and make all the benefits and apply them to the district? That's basically what I'm thinking. I mean, it's right there, and there's no gas out there. Okay, second question, sorry, like for real. So the second thing was, you know, you mentioned a certain date on one of these properties. I believe it was the furthest one out. In regards to the one that's in that tight community, I think it's slide number 8. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to the name of it. Yeah.
The Zangaro South.
Yeah, so what happens, how long do we have to take advantage of doing something there? Does it just sit for a certain amount of years before it becomes back into the developer's hands?
That's what that 2036 is.
On that far out property, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's both of them.
Both of them both have that date in there of 2036 in their agreement we have.
But the first one does not.
Are you talking about the one in Palm Valley?
Oh, Palm Valley, Thomas, 144th Avenue.
Yeah, that one would not.
That one's in our title. We as far as the property goes, we own that
So
property.
2 are in our title, 2 are within the developer's title, so long as we build within a certain amount of time. That's exactly what I wanted to know. Thank you.
I just had a question about the property out by Scott Libby. I thought that a couple of years ago when we were doing all the renovations at Scott Libby, it was said that they were thinking sewer was going to get brought out to Scott Libby in the next few years due to development. Do we still think that's happening, or does that not look like it's happening anymore?
The current status is about all I can really give to you is the property that's directly south of our property of Scott Libby was slated to be homes. It was never platted or anything like that. It's since changed hands in ownership. It's now in more of a commercial industrial zoning now. I would say that they're looking to develop it more into a commercial warehouse type building scenario.
You said gas station, right?
They are, my understanding is, I don't want to speak out of my term. My recollection is when they do develop that land, they do need to bring the sewer up across I-10. There is a sleeve underneath I-10 to house it. The intention is for that sewer line to eventually get to us. We did a financial analysis when we built support services to see what it would cost for the district to do it, and it was in the millions, just to bring it to our property line, not necessarily bring the rest of the way. But currently, we don't have any issues with the septic systems at Scott Libby, at support services. There are no issues with any of the systems that we currently have.
That is certainly good news.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions before we move on? Thank you, Dan. I appreciate the presentation. Next up, number 3 is the Arizona revised statutes related to the sale lease of district-owned land. Wendy Qualls is going to be presenting for us.
Thank you, President Kleiner, members of the governing board. So this is, again, is just information only, in case in the future we do want to look at either selling or leasing some of our land. So what I'm going through tonight is the Arizona revised statutes. All of the statutes can be found on the www.azleg.gov website. So ARS 15341, general powers and duties. The governing board shall, and in statute, shall means must. So the governing board must manage and control school property within the district. This statute does allow us to enter partnerships with other entities, like a charter school or a base or another school district, for them to operate one of our sites if we ever choose to do that. ARS 15342 are discretionary powers of the governing board, and the governing board may enter into lease agreements either as the lessor or the lessee for a period of less than 20 years without voter approval unless the transaction has to do with construction, and then voter approval may be necessary. The district, the governing board can choose to sell and enter into lease purchases that are greater than 20 years, up to 99 years, with voter authorization. And also, we have to look at any school facilities board requirements related to the property and consider that as well. There are a couple of exceptions that have to go out to the voters. The first one would be if the property value is less than $50,000 that's being exchanged. That can be exchanged without board approval, or if the property is procured through a renewable energy development agreement. Another exception to having to go out to bid, or sorry, out to go to the voters, would be if we had approved, adopted, formal plan of what we plan to do with our land. And in that case, we would be able to sell property. We'd have up to 2 years to purchase like property. If it wasn't purchased within 2 years, we'd have to use it to pay off our debt. And if there was no debt remaining at the time, we'd have to reduce taxes for the property. We could only use the provision of having the plan if the following 3 items are met. So we have to be the sole owner of the property. The property was not purchased with funds from school facilities board. And that the transaction does not violate 15341 subsection G, which is the school facilities board requirement that says we cannot reduce the square footage, and if we still need that square footage for students, so we cannot reduce it. Still under the discretionary powers, the board could exchange unapproved or approved properties, including school sites or unapproved properties. If the board would determine that the property is unnecessary for continuation of the operation of the district, and that it is based on sound business principles. So basically, if we're going to exchange property, we would have to be getting higher value than what we're getting. So next, if we look at the election, ARS 15491, so we would have to hold an election if we plan to sell or purchase a school building. Also, if for a lease of more than 20 years, we would need to go out to our voters and let them that one of those exceptions we've discussed earlier. With the approval to negotiate a lease, if we had not entered the lease within a 20-year period, we have to go back out to the voters to get authorization again, to continue to negotiate. And in that, with the voter approval, we would have to say which site we were wanting to lease. So ARS 151102 is how you can dispose of or use the proceeds that are generated from the sale or lease. So the sale or lease proceeds can be used to pay down bond indebtedness. And if there is no debt to be paid, then to be used to reduce school taxes, the property taxes. One exception to that is a school district, an elementary district that our debt is less than 7% of our assessed value. And we are around 4% debt of our assessed value. So we would be able to lease the property, and any of our properties that we own, lease the properties and use the proceeds for either M&O purposes or capital. If we sell the property and it exceeds $100,000, the funds can only be used for capital items. So there's a little more restriction if we sell.
Wendy, can you say those 2 things again, please?
So if we lease the property, the proceeds can be used for M&O or capital. If we sell the property for more than $100,000, it can only be used, the proceeds can only be used for capital. Capital or the first option of debt service and reduced taxes. So if the property is less than $100,000, or we lease the property to other schools, or the lease is less than a year, we don't have to follow all of those B and C sections related to restrictions. And just to make sure you don't skirt around the rule, they say that if you enter a lease that's less than 1 year but it's renewable, it's considered more than a year. So it's subject to all the items that we just discussed. And then for purposes of determining what capital outlay means, we looked at ARS 15903 subsection C. The normal capital items we know about are land, building improvements, furniture and equipment, vehicle transportation, textbooks, instructional aids, library books, principal payment on our bond, and also interest on our bond, and then school district administration emergency needs that are directly related to these. Those are the items when I mentioned that it can be used for capital, those are the items proceeds to be used. And then any future discussion when we talk about leasing or selling property would be done in executive session with our attorney. Any questions?
I have a couple of questions. Can you give me some examples, maybe that you've seen of when a district has leased or sold property, what the motives and the outcome would be?
So to lease property, to sell property, it's generally because they're trying to get property to build a school. So you might sell a parcel that you have in one part of your district or exchange it for a parcel on the other side where you actually need a school. Leasing large amount is generally farming. Some have community gardens. There's also a district that leases their property to an investor who then builds structures on that land. And this district actually brings those facilities back. They did a private investment agreement. Where is that? Higley? Where at? Higley? Oh. They didn't have bond authorization, so instead they did a private agreement with a company that actually leased their land, built the school, and then leased it. And then they're buying it. And in the past, with the school facilities board, we actually leased our property to school facilities board. They built the schools, made the payments, and now that they're paid off, the school starts.
So I had a question, but I think I answered my own question in my mind, but I'm gonna ask you anyway. The property that the developer owns, because we don't own that, would not be qualified for the exchange of property into a better location, correct? Because we don't physically own that property? Okay, yeah, that was right in my head. Okay, second, instead of the gas station, can we use it for a solar field?
That
Right?
has been one of my ideas for years. I first said
Mm-hmm,
rental for storage for
mm-hmm,
RVs and things, and then solar.
yeah,
The issue with solar is that the solar that it generates, or the power it generates, can only be used on the parcel of land that generates. Back when I researched it before.
does the parcel include the services building and the school? No, it's only that.
And it would generate more energy than what we need. And from my knowledge, the agreements with school districts, when you over-generate power, you're paying back more dollar-wise. Like, they'll buy it back from you, maybe at 4 cents, but you're paying 11 cents to generate. So you're losing money.
So maybe something to look into again. But if we lease it to a solar farm, then they can pay us for it. If they want to take that on. Just want to make sure I got that. Okay, thank you. Just trying to help us all. All right, thank you.
So Wendy, then would another use potentially be, we've been a growing district, so we haven't had declining enrollment, but let's say 10 years from now, when we start having declining enrollment, does it ever happen that then, let's say we don't end up building something on this Thomas Road, Thomas Park, at 144th location, that we would potentially sell that basically to help our budget and, maybe under the guise of the one that you can use, or lease it, I guess, is what we would want to do. We lease it so that we could use it potentially for M&O.
So we could, if we look at that parcel, we'd have to go back and look at the deed restrictions. I know on the deed, I believe it says it can only be used for an elementary school. So we may have to work something with the donor, because they took it as a tax write-off when they donated it. So we'd probably have to work with the donor on top of getting approval from the voters to sell that.
Okay, but we could potentially, this is not, I don't think this is on our scenario, but we could lease it to, let's say, a charter school, that would fulfill the school portion of it, and then potentially use the proceeds from that to benefit our own M&O budget.
Which would be better to lease it than to sell it, because we can only use that in one pile, correct?
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Wendy? Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate it. Moving on to item number 4, discussion of boundaries for undeveloped land that is currently in the western side of our district. I won't read all of that, so thanks, Tommy, for being here.
No problems. Good evening, Governing Board. I'm here tonight to just kind of talk about where our district is and what we're looking like from a construction standpoint. I have no idea what this is. John, get it out. Okay. I'm like, I promise I'm not touching that. So the first picture that you have here is basically just our district grid map. Our district splits up our 66 square miles into almost 1 mile grids. A lot of it's just used for student location, and then so we can see where populations are in neighborhoods, and etc. So that's what that is. I wanted to give that to you as a reference because as we start talking about the other map areas, I'm going to throw out some grade numbers to you, and I just don't want you to be confused by them because it takes a while to get used to them. At some point, you will memorize them, and Amy will cut it out with a number, and you know exactly where that is right away. So I would never expect you to learn that quickly. Just the overall from our grid map, as you can see, is we are east side or we are west side. Our district is split down the middle at an angle from Luke Air Force Base, Pebble Creek, the new industrial plaza that's going in along 303, and the prison. So we are completely just separate. There's an east side and a west side. The north and northwest side of our district is still a lot of farming and acreage homes, where the east and southeast is very dense with homes and neighborhoods. We are starting to see the dense homes and neighborhoods coming to our west side of our district as well. So, Stevie, you're going to do this? You want me to? Okay. We can go to the next one. I'm going to take the microphone and actually go over to the screen and pretend to be Dana White for a little while. Because there's a lot of information involved, and I want to make sure we all get this. So this first map is kind of our active construction map that we've kind of put together for our district. Everything in the blue is whether beginning construction phases. This is where they have set up a fence, so we know trucks are going to be coming soon, or there are trucks actually moving dirt, and we see them plotting land. There's some areas I want to point out. First, this area here by Naval Paget Elementary is where those apartment homes were set. The fence went up on, I think, Thursday of last week. So we should see trucks starting to show up within the next. Are they here? I did not.
They are already here. I drive by it every day. I'm like, wow, you guys are moving fast. It took you a long time, but now all of a sudden they're on it.
Yeah, I did not drive by today, so I did not get to see when I drove. I think it was Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening. I did notice there were still no trucks yet. So that is coming. This area is slated for Naval Paget and Western Sky under our current boundaries. Down just south of that, as we get over here, this is behind the Cal Ranch shore at Monte Vista and Pebble Creek Parkway. This blue section is on the route that I'm driving right now for Palm Valley, so I get to see it every day, and they've plotted that within a week. The plots are done, the tractor's moving in the last corner of it today. So that is coming, that is homes. Originally, this was all going to be mall and then apartments, but they changed it over to residential homes as well. Just below that, I'm going to skip forward, just below that in yellow, we just got, Dan and I got an email, that is now going to be apartment homes. That just came through in the last 2 weeks, so that's a brand new one that came in. On the east side, when you look at beginning construction, these are really the only 2 neighborhoods that are beginning and we haven't seen anything in yet. So as we move west, where we see more blue, this first section is along Camelback, between Perryville and Citrus Roads. That is a Fulton Homes community. They started that at the end of last year, and they've really kind of been pushing on it in the last couple of months. We're still a good year before I think we see a home and someone actually moving in. As we move a little farther west from there, they're starting to do land work on, and this is going to be north of Camelback, but south of Bethany, just east of Jackrabbit Trail.
And Jackrabbit right now ends just before this community would begin. The road is finished, but it is still closed. And we're going to discuss that in just a minute. They're starting land work here. This is just south and west of Canyon View High School. So we're going to see homes coming here. This, under current boundaries, is also slated for Belen Soto K-8. So we'll keep that in mind. We'll discuss some more on that as we go forward. Up top, Dan showed you this area. This is where our school at Perryville and Glendale is. This is Canyon View High School. This is Dan Harrow Trails going north. I'm not sure when Dan took those pictures, but when I drove by last week doing something up here for routes, there were trucks driving all through here, so I'm not sure if they're going to start something soon, like just the land work and the survey. But this is coming, and talking with the builder last time we talked, they wanted that quickly, especially after the high school was built. And they would love if we said we were building in an area, because then they'll push even faster, because when a school opens, usually more houses come. So this is starting to become more active. It's not as active as other areas yet. And then as we go west of Jackrabbit and down to Thomas, this is the new Arroyo Seco here, and this is their phase 2. And they have been just barreling through on that since school started on the 17th with our safe place. Nothing had been going on all summer, and all of a sudden it's plotted, they're almost ready to go. So these are our active, and then the last one, our plan. I'm sorry, these are our plan. They're starting to do work. It's beginning. We're still at least a year away from seeing much of anything from those. So I wanted to point those out to you first, so we can see what is coming down the road. Our green is our active, and this is where houses or any kind of residential is actually going on right now, and we can see kids coming from at any time. On the east side of the district, the areas impacted is up in Barbara Roby Elementary. We're not getting many students out of it because of price point, but it is active and building. And then in the Dreaming Summit neighborhood, there's a small plot that are acre homes. Prices are really high. We've not seen any students out of that, and it's been open for about 3 years now. They're almost semi-custom homes that are going in there. We're not seeing much. The east side, where there is more active, is down at Palm Valley, just north of McDowell by Litchfield Road. That's the old golf course. There are houses up. We have framing. We have some with stucco. We still have not seen any students come out of there yet. I did call and speak with them. They've had some sales, no families. They're not expecting very many families at all, but they've not seen any families moving with students for our district at all yet. But that is coming along very quickly as well. It took them a while to get going, but once they did, it went up fast. In the center of our district, see right over here off of Pebble Creek, it's a very small area that popped up, and we're like, where did this come from? It's 3 streets, they're all cul-de-sacs. KB Home is building their starter homes. We have 7 students out of there already, and they're expecting to see probably another 15 to 20 through this school year. This area is set for Palm Valley Elementary and Western Sky. So we've got kiddos coming out of here now, which is great. Strategically on our part in transportation, a little difficult finding safe places. I do not want to stop on Pebble Creek Parkway, but we figured that out, but we're glad to see kiddos coming out of there now. As we move west of 303, we're going to go to the Sedan neighborhood where Belen Soto is located. This final corner is actually working. Inside the loop, there are houses up. We're seeing families start moving in. We haven't seen many students in our district high school yet, but this final corner, they are actually paving roads finally. They've decided who's going to build and what models are going to be there. We should see models start coming up within the next 3 to 4 months, they said. This will be the final piece of the Sedan Canadian, that 1 square mile for Belen Soto. So these 2 sections went really quick. This one's staggered, and then this one now, once it comes in, they're expecting to take off as well. Just west of Perryville, north of Camelback, is the Zen Harrow Trails. Dan pointed out in his presentation our other site for the school in the south, Zen Harrow. This section is filling up pretty quickly. We have, last year I think we were about maybe 12 students from the whole neighborhood. This year we're about 35, and more keep moving in. So this is still active, which is great. Glad to see it again. As we move farther west of Jackrabbit, up to this area, these are all spec homes. They have not sold anything yet, like someone come in for a whole house, you pick yourself. These are all spec. They're basic inside, and owners or buyers can choose what goes inside. But they have a good 45 already built, but the row cellar open has not been authorized to actually move in yet. This is the next area that we believe is going to jump real quick because they're expecting house prices to be low and starter home size as well. This area is set right now for Verado Elementary and Verado Middle School. So we still have some space there. As you move straight down south, we have the, just east of Verado High School. That, the lower section is done, the northern section of that is being built right now by Richmond American. A lot of families are starting to move in there. Richmond American is known for their family friendly homes, and we're starting to see these were starter homes as well. This again is Verado L and Verado Middle as well. And then just south of that, of course, is Arroyo Seco. I just pulled before I came over here, and I wanted to look because I hadn't seen anything. We have 3 students out of this neighborhood. One is at Verado Middle School, one is on variance to Verado Heritage, and the other is on variance to Verado Elementary. So we're only getting 3 students when I have not seen anyone on a bus yet. So, but that is active. People are moving in. So as we move into Verado, we have the market site against McDowell and Verado Bay that is building and moving north to meet the rest of Verado. It was up here. Not much has happened in here as sales yet, but houses are going up. So this is still active. This is a little worrisome because it is Verado Heritage boundary right now as well. And then as we move into Verado, this is all brand new behind the golf course. It's slowly coming along. Megan was taking a walk one day and she goes, "Where did this come from? Did you know about this?" "Yes, Megan, we just hadn't seen it." She goes, "Let's start it." So this is pretty big. We have 1 new student out of here that's already moving right on the edge. I think it was part of the old community, but we're watching this as well. And this is Verado Elementary and Verado Middle. So active, currently going on right now. It does not look like it did maybe 8, 9 years ago when everything on this would have been green. So we're able to keep up with it for the most part. But I wanted to make sure we showed what our active work. The yellow section is what's planned down the road. They've talked to us about it. We've gotten emails on it, but we're still not seeing anything. The biggest sections to think about are right here along Citrus between Indian School and Camelback. This first piece is Allen Ranches. We just got another email. They're looking to start work. This they started years ago. They're going to put houses in. It's kind of dropped off. We haven't seen anything else come out of it. We're not even sure if it's still set for homes because everything along here is now industrial. We can do more research to find that out. So this is one area because this would be Soto also. Kind of made us a little nervous on it. As we move west of the Soto area, this is the old dairy right now on Indian School and Perryville. That was sold to Fulton Homes. They're expecting to start seeing houses about 2024, 2025. They're going through the process of selling the dairy right now. So in 4 or 5 years, we'll start seeing something out of that. This is Scott Levine and Verado Middle School right now. So things we can look at down in the future. Jackrabbit and Camelback, we just got an email on this about 2 or 3 months ago. This is now, there's an airport landing strip right over here. This is now going to be houses. We're not sure who the builder is going to be yet, what size, number of lots yet, but this has changed over to residential. So we're going to keep our eye on that. We move our way down over into Verado. This is surrounding the high school. It butts up to Victory. There are plans for homes here, but Verado has not given much information on that. I don't think they have builders or anything yet in that, but it's been on the books for a while, so we just kind of keep it there to watch what's going on. We drop down a little bit. This west of Arroyo Seco in yellow is their next phase after 2 to meet up with Verado. And then I added here the small corner. Those are apartment complexes that Buckeye is going through the process of approving. And then I think it was yesterday or Friday, Dan sent me an email and said, "Hey, just a heads up, on this corner, they're petitioning, Buckeye is going to zone this and take over, and someone's proposing apartments here as well. So we're starting to see the multi-family residential come to the west side, which we're not really used to. This has all been single family, but we're starting to see some more walking in over here on this side. And then the last apartment complex I just want to point out is right here against McDowell and Verado Way. That came through last year. We started discussing that. There was a question on if it's our district or not. It is technically our district, even though it's south of where McDowell's line now. But this is planned as well. Nothing else has been heard about it, but it is planned. So as you look at our map, it kind of goes little to a lot happening. We're going to start seeing more over here. There's not much more we can build on this side. But this is where all of our growth is. So as an administrative team, we've been meeting every other month to just discuss this. Where are we at on construction? What does it look like for builders? How is growth looking? Are we up? Are we down? Where are we seeing the growth come from in neighborhoods? And Wendy asked for me if I could just put together what a construction map looked like where we were currently. The maps that Dan and Wendy use in their presentation, or Dan used in his presentation, that's our old construction map from, that was 5 years ago maybe now. So you can kind of compare and see where everything was blank before now we're seeing it. So this is our construction map. Any questions on that at all? That I may be able to help with. Yes, ma'am.
There are also some homes down off of Pebble Creek that are like patio homes. Are those all retired or like part of Pebble Creek or something? Because they literally just came up right in a couple of months, but they're
Since May.
yeah, right. I mean, there's 100 of them. It seems like.
And when
Are they all over 55?
When I reached out to them, it was a 55+ community to tie in outside of Pebble Creek, but get the kind of same deal. And then I learned today we have 2 students coming out of there, so they're no longer patio homes for 55+. They are an apartment complex.
Apartment complex.
It's an apartment complex called the Harvard at Pebble Creek. The Village of Harvard.
That's actually patio homes?
Yes.
It's apartment complex.
They're patio homes.
Okay.
Patio homes, yes. Because I was like, I've been driving by on my route, and I'm like, oh, those came up really fast. Okay, that's nice. And then Susan goes, okay, we have 2 kids that are out of here, and we don't have a bus stop. I'm like, it's not for kids.
Yeah, I
So
think even the signage said 55+ for a while. I mean, I drive by there a lot. That's what I'm saying. I didn't expect anything to even be there, but I guess they must have changed that. Maybe there was some additional.
Yeah, it changed, and they just started renting within the last 15 days. So this family just moved in, one of the first families. The area that they're in is slated for, it's right here, is slated for Scott Libby and Verado Middle School. So, but yeah, Susan and I just had a bus stop there today because we just found out today that it's not 55 anymore. You have 2 students. So.
That's still part of 64, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Or right on the edge there, or they go
Yes.
out, because they actually go out to Scott Libby and stuff too, right? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, everything west of Pebble Creek in 64 goes to Scott Libby and Verado Middle. Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions
I can move on to the
for
next
Tony?
one.
Okay.
Steve, if you could go to the next one there for us, please. So what I wanted to do also to bring up so we can see is this is our current kindergarten through 5th grade boundaries. Where we are right now, these are the ones that you guys approved in December of 2018 as we were preparing to open Belen Soto Elementary. Nothing has changed since then. I just want to, as a refresher, where we are. This is all Maple Padgett. This is Belen Soto. This is where the bulk of our growth is going, and I think what we're going to need to do as a district and leadership team is start opening the conversation of where are we on enrollment for some of our campuses, and do we need to start talking about maybe getting together to adjust some boundaries down the road. There's no proposals going to be presented tonight, it's just an information, so you can instruct which way would you like us to go from here to start talking. So this is just our current K-5. Our areas of biggest concern is the population at Belen Soto and Verado Heritage. With those numbers, Verado Heritage is kind of packed in here. I'm not sure what much more we could do without splitting some areas, but that's something we can discuss. So this is our current Everywhere on this side, we are looking okay. It's west of this 303 that is starting to cause some angst as we look at some stuff. See if you could go to the next one, 6 through 8, please. Thank you. So then our 6th through 8th grade, for all of our middle schools and our K-8s, Belen Soto takes over this section here, and remember what we did was we tried to align as much as possible with high school boundaries as well. Barato Middle School takes up a large section here, Heritage down here, and all of our growth is here. As an administrative team, as we've been talking about growth and what's coming and where construction is, we started having conversations of what can we do if we can't build the next school and make sure we still have room. And what we've done is taken some areas here, and this is kind of those grid numbers come in, to start splitting some of those areas where we have no students yet. No one has moved in yet. Construction is starting, we're still a year more out. To start discussing, is it something as a leadership team you would want us to discuss about splitting to start moving if new students come in before we can get our next school built? Can you go to the next one for me, Steve, please? And the largest area we did the grid map. There should be 4, I believe.
That's all we have on our.
That's all, okay, if you could open that last one, you can see, I apologize. I thought I put that last one, we can always get that loaded up for you in email. Areas of bugs and harrow trails, it's this section from here up is active construction that no one has moved into yet. What we've discussed is possibly talking about and looking, is this an area if new students move in, can they go to another school without without splitting a street or splitting a neighbor from a neighbor? Everything west of here also is scheduled for, as you can see, Belen Soto in this neighborhood. Since nothing has started yet, is that an area we can discuss? And then up along by the new high school in areas that are not built yet. These are things that we wanted to bring up to discuss. Which direction would you like us to start looking into? What is the best scenario? Which road would you like us to go down? Our goal is to not disrupt a neighborhood as much as possible, but also looking forward to if we are not able to build the next school in time with the growth, what can we do to accommodate our current population as well?
I'll start with some commentary, if that's okay. I think my goal would be aligned with your goal in that I would like to see boundaries that just make sense. I don't like boundaries that you have to jump over other boundaries to get to where your school is. So following in the theme of neighborhood schools is obviously ideal. If we can make those boundary changes that make sense before people are actually living there, I also appreciate that, because that seems much more fair to those folks that are buying into that area if they have kids in school, and that's one of the reasons that they're buying. When I look at the current enrollment numbers, and I look at the capacity information that we were given per campus from when we talked about the boundaries, everyone is 100 or more, underneath what the adjusted capacity numbers are. So I think it's really hard to say what that time frame is going to be. And I understand right now our enrollment is down in general. So it feels a little premature since we seem to be under capacity everywhere. And I know part of the process of building another school and getting that approval is we have to be over capacity at some point. But I would appreciate maybe a summary refresher on how that works, Wendy. When we go to ask for a bond, we have to be over capacity, right? Something like that. I mean, is that wrong? Or maybe you know, Tommy. I mean, feel free, whoever knows the answer to that.
When it comes to numbers,
So you have to be over capacity to be approved for school from school facility board. That's not a requirement when you
Okay,
If
but
we
it would
did
still
go
be,
for a bond, would we be eligible for any school facilities board money? Would we need to be over capacity? Is that even a possibility to get money from them? So that, is that a consideration we should be thinking of?
And I have to go back and look at their numbers again, but I believe we're thousands away now. Now that we're down so much, we are a long ways from the schools, facilities board providing support.
I just mean, numbers aside, would there be any chance that we would get a significant amount of money outside of a bond from the school facilities board anyway?
If we had an increase, trying to remember the numbers of the decrease. I think we'd have to go up by almost 2,000 kids to qualify for. And then, Dan, do you know the square footage, the amount per square foot right now? It's changing.
The dollar amounts changing. They're redoing their,
They're redoing the formula for the
They're
school
redoing it.
facility board. But it is a significant amount if we qualify.
but really you're saying based on our, as a district, our general education philosophy and our action philosophy, when we would ask our local voters to vote for a bond that we are saying we need a new school, would be long before 2,000 students over capacity. So although that is potentially something that we could do, most likely that's not what we would end up doing, because we would want to take action to make sure that we weren't that far over capacity and stem off the issue sooner rather than later.
So the overcapacity, the 2,000 is about how many students we have to increase from our current number for the school facility board to consider a school. You just have to be over their calculated capacity by a couple of kids and make it.
Okay.
Wendy, do you recall the date? I forget the year that they were saying we would be eligible. I think it was like, what, 20, they bumped it, 2026 or 2027?
I was thinking 26 was the last number that we saw.
We
It was
bumped.
right around 25 or 26 after we opened soda, correct?
I'll look it up later.
When our numbers were looking good, we were so far, and then they bumped us. Like, we got excited and then it changed.
And Ms. Moran, I agree, you know, with our numbers dropping, I think a lot of the purpose to come is what can we do while there are no students yet before we unbalance that, to learn what direction the board would have for us to go with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great to discuss that now and get ahead of it before people do move in and then they have false expectations of where they'll be going to school. So yeah, I'm all for having the discussion and making any of those changes proactively rather than reactively. So I think that's great.
I think that it's good that we start looking at this now. Actually, I think it's almost better when we're a little bit down, because I think we're going to probably see a lot of our students coming back as our schools are opening, right? We're all hoping for that. So if we do this now, while it's less of an effect on as many students, it's easier on them as they come back. And also with the idea of, we have places where there are kids right now, but we don't have kids coming. So I agree, like, let's look at that before there's kids there, because we know that people buy homes with the idea of my kid's gonna go to this school. And so we don't wanna have them tricked into living somewhere and then their kids aren't going there. We also know that with Bell and Soda, when it opened, it pretty much opened at capacity. So there's not really room for growth there. So I think we do need to look at this sooner rather than later.
In terms of what, you know, you're saying, what road do you want us to go down? Like specific, I know you're looking for specific feedback and I want to give you that, but what are the options? I mean, I understand, you know, looking at boundaries where there's no kids, that seems like a good choice, right? Just because it's, you know, but without knowing the timeline in terms of when we are opening a new school, is this for a year? Is this for 3 years? You know, without knowing that, it's hard because I completely agree. Just using the Lynn Soto Verado Middle School example, there looks like there could be that pocket at Camelback and right just to the left of that. Yeah, that box right there, right? That and going over there to the right where you were saying that there's, yeah, that right, all of that. That seems like that could go to Verado, right? I mean, I don't know who lives there. I don't know the construction. I'm just saying in my mind, right? I mean, thinking about, to Kim's point, you don't want to pick and choose over here, and then you have kids that, you know, you're crossing over boundaries to get to their school. But I guess the question to that is, yeah, you can absolutely investigate that. That seems to make a whole lot of sense. But if the next school, for example, is going to go 3 blocks north of that, you know, what's that time frame? I mean, how many different schools are they gonna have to go to? They're going to Berlin Center now, and they're gonna go to Brower Middle, and they're gonna go to the new school. So I guess without knowing that time horizon of what we want the new school to be, I know that we're not going to get what we want in terms of school facilities money, but we could go for a bond, we have other options. So without knowing that time horizon, it's hard, but I do agree that Brother Middle is much lower in enrollment, even in our best time, when we're not losing enrollment, seems to be the overflow spot, because it's, you know, I mean, it's a great school, it's a great campus, it's close, and has space, right? Whereas Glensoda doesn't, and yet it seems like that Sedalia neighborhood is continuing to grow. So we've got to find some way to alleviate that, and whether that's utilizing Scott Libby or, you know, other pockets where we can break those off. I think, to your point, Grotto Heritage sort of is what it is. It's hard because it's so compacted down there, but I think Glensoda would be, to me, be the focus of making sure we're separating those kids now before people, you know, all of those neighborhoods start filling up.
And I think timeline-wise, what the committee we're kind of looking for is now the best time to start working on this, to make the change before students come in. So when the first family moves in, they know where they're gonna go. We don't have to worry about, is the first 5 families gonna go here because we catch it time, and then we're splitting the neighbors gonna go over here instead because it's newer. The timeline, are we looking, should we do this within the next year to come back to where we do the whole process? What is a timeline that will work? Because I think I would recommend the discussion we try to address this before someone moves in, so we don't have the back and forth. Years ago, when Dreaming Summit was being built, before that, Litchfield had buses. We had buses going to Litchfield Elementary from Dreaming Summit, but we also had buses going to Forte from the same neighborhood. And Ms. Clymer, Ms. Moran, you would live next door to your students would go to one school, yours would go to the other, because you moved in at different times, because the growth was so out there was nothing we could do. We're at a point where we can sit back and say, let's take that burden off first. Is within this school year, next school year, what is the time frame you want us to look at to go forward to discuss this before we get it? We're probably a good 6 to 8 months out of first students moving into this northern partisan area. This is right against Canyon View High School also, and these are a lot smaller than the rest of the house in the neighborhood. So these are who's building up here in Richmond. They're expecting a lot more younger families to move in.
Knowing that time horizon, my opinion would be such that you make that change by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. That gives you 3 months to, and this is just sort of a one-off, right? This isn't redoing all the boundaries. This is looking at those areas that are undeveloped, that we're expecting new folks. To your point, if you don't catch it early, we're going to regret not making that decision. So I would say, in terms of the one-off neighborhoods of undeveloped land, I think you do it in the next 3 to 4 months, and you beat that 6-month timeline, because they will build faster than you think. I mean, if they can build it in 4 months, they will build it in 4 months. They tell you 6 months, but if they can throw it up sooner, they will. So.
Turnaround right now is between 90 to 120 days from when they put the first little thing up for your electrical panel to they're doing your final walkthrough. And that's quicker than it was over the last couple of years. You were about 6, 8, 9 months. Years ago, like 6, 7, 8, and you were looking at 2, 3 months. You were doing process, you're moving in. So it's evened out, but it is getting quicker, because even with everything going on right now, home sales have not dropped. It actually popped up a little bit. I am involved in a webinar once a month. It is a national that talks about the housing market, and it talks about Phoenix and Tucson and those that are lower. They are still shocked that homes are still being built like they are. And Arizona is one of their areas they keep talking about that numbers just aren't dropping and prices aren't dropping. They're still seeing 10,000, 15,000 price increases every other month, and they're not understanding. They're not upset about it. They just don't understand how it's happening. So yeah, I appreciate that timeline. Sometimes you take that to our team and say, I think we can do this. Let's start talking real quick and what we need to do, because there's
what is everyone? I mean, I'm not the only one. That seems to make sense to me. So before you,
Yeah. I mean, I would say I would expedite it as soon as possible, because it isn't when the families move in that they want to know where they're going to school, it's when they're buying the house, that they're looking at our boundaries. So if I'm going out there tomorrow and buying a home, that's where I'm gonna expect my kids are gonna go to school. And so then when I go to move in 6 months from now, and then you tell me, oh, now you're at this other school, they're all good schools, you know, it wouldn't hurt my feelings, but for some people, that's really tied into their expectations. So I think, if it's something that we know we need to do, the sooner the better.
And right now, just so you know, it's just this top area right here, just south of Bethany, west of Perryville, is the only area where we're expecting students to come. The rest we're still a little ways away. But this is the area that was, when Superintendent Kenny and we were meeting last, she's like, how fast is that going? I go, well, the streets just went in, I had to build them on the map. And now we're seeing stuff, so.
Now, would you just do that one area, or would you do the one that's even southwest of that?
What we would discuss is this area, plus this area, plus this up here to start with. So as students started moving, we didn't have the crossover. So let's say we do build our school, 2023, 2024. By the time this really gets going with students, they've already settled in here to be prepared to move to their new school, and they're not doing here to up there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. That small portion right there on the border of Verado, do people live there already?
Yes, this is pretty full, and when we talked boundaries in 2018, this was an area for elementary that originally was proposed to go to Soto to keep the K-12 alignment. But with interest from elementary parents who've been in Verado for a long time, we discussed as a team and then brought back to you guys, we decided to keep this with Verado Elementary, but this 6 through 8 goes to Soto because then they go to Canyon View. So it was kind of that.
So it's split elementary
Yeah,
and
this,
middle.
the Canyon View goes straight up kind of like this and then go just like the Soto boundary does for the most part. Our elementary kind of goes up and over to keep them with Verado Elementary, yes.
I couldn't agree more. So the long-term goal obviously is then to build on the upside of Canyon View, so that then we can filter that whole section as that continues to grow. The small little plot that you had talked about that's right behind Verado High School, I'm pretty sure that we had a developer come out to the Agua Fria School District, talk about putting in their streets. They signed some documentation about getting that going fairly soon, so.
And the last we had heard, and you know what,
Step back.
yeah, it's so funny because they'll come out and tell us a meeting, and 2-3 months will go by and I'm like, you heard me things, we kind of said, well, that's been put on hold, like, oh, okay.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we see trucks there. So, I mean, it's hit or miss. I drive down the street and I'm like, oh, okay, they started. I'll write this one down. So, yeah.
Well, Tommy, now that you say that, so when I look at the map and I'm looking at 24A, which is where we have right now Belen Soto 6 through 8 and K through 5 going to Verado Elementary, because we wanted the high school consistency with Canyon View. If we carve out the northern part of 24A and 24B, we're going against what our theory was. And so, we're not consistent. Because we're gonna have the lower part of 24A in the stay with your peers for middle and high school, and then we'll have the northern part of that saying, oh, you're new, so we're not gonna stick with our thought process. I'm not saying I have a solution to that, I'm just pointing that out.
And a lot of that, Ms. Moran, was to just alleviate our room with Soto and so we can build a new one. Because once a new school came in, and I mean, this has never been determined, this is our new school.
Yeah.
It could go right in the middle here, which is that southern side that, that Dan has pointed out. It would all change then as well. It was just to basically keep them with a group so they're not, oh, we got too full here, we got to move you over here now when you started here to go here. That was the idea behind it. Ultimately, our goal is that alignment. You're absolutely right for everyone. We just have to keep in mind where we are versus where the high school is as well on our growth. So yeah.
That's fair, thanks, Tommy.
Yes.
I'm gonna say an unpopular opinion, I'm sure, but is that I know we're doing our best to keep our kids aligned, elementary, middle, high school, and I think that's great, but I think at the same time, we have to make sure our kids don't get over full. And if that means that we have to have some kids that don't line up right, then we have to do that, because think that if, I could be wrong, but I think if the high school district has to change their boundaries, they're not going to necessarily worry about what our boundaries are.
Yeah, I don't think that was actually one of their stated priorities was alignment. In their last go-round, I don't think that that was, I could be wrong, but I don't think that was actually one of their stated priorities was to keep it together.
Yeah.
It was, absolutely.
It's one of ours, not one of all the three of
It's
us.
not there, and it's
Yeah.
not there so far.
So I think that again, if there's their responsibility with all this growth happening, that we might be changes in the high school boundaries, and it's not how I know.
It's a great
And
point.
with their growth as well, because remember, for Canyon View, which is located here, their boundary comes all the way across this way back over to El Mirage right now. And with the growth that we're seeing, that they're seeing also, because there are higher priced homes, a higher price point, is families that are established with high school kids, their parents are buying them more expensive because they can afford nice things, because kids are going to college. So they're getting the higher pricing that we don't get, they're getting it. They're going to eventually have to meet again to discuss their boundaries as well, and it may be a time that we're not ready to, because we don't need to. I love the idea of working with them, and I was on the last boundary committee when they opened Canyon View, and a lot of discussion with it, but it's so different between the two, because demographics, because they go so far south of the freeway, also they have to think so much other as well, but they're going to have to come to a point to make their decision also. We may not be ready yet because we're set. We may have to, even though they're set. So working with them is great. Ultimately, it's our kiddos that always come first.
The other question that we had for you all as if we start to move forward is with the process itself. Do you feel that with them being undeveloped areas, did we need to form a boundary committee and go through a committee process again, or did you want us to bring just the suggestions back to you all and go through the process that way?
I'll go first and I'll let everyone else comment. I think it depends on how many areas. And if you're talking about one pocket of neighborhood, I'm not sure that, that's a sort of preemptive move now to make sure that we're keeping that school capacity where it is. If we're talking about more than that, and we're talking about potentially restructuring our priorities, right, into going different things, I think that is something else. I think what you just said in terms of this immediate time horizon of that one area is undeveloped, we need to make that move before we start seeing students there. I don't think we need to go through the entire process that we did before, knowing that in another year, potentially 18 months, we will be going through that process and redoing all of it. So I don't think for just the one section, but I'll open it up for conversation.
Well, and the idea behind it was to do, it wasn't just this. When I put something together and I go to the committee to discuss, it would be just one area, so that later we can like, okay, now we have to do this. I would be looking at kind of this area here and seeing what is best to move and where is the growth actually coming? What's the next that they think is going to happen? Where should we move now? So it would be just more than one little neighborhood. My focus would be on areas that we don't have any students yet, that we know construction is coming. So when they do move in, something's already set, it's not going to affect and overindulge in areas that we don't need to overindulge anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think having this conversation tonight balances the transparency. I mean, it's not a secret that that's the area we're looking at to potentially do some rebalancing, and the fact that if people aren't living there yet, we're not pulling a fast one or anything like that for them. So for me, in forming a boundary committee, the purpose is feedback. Well, there's no one that's living there to give us the feedback. So I feel like it is a decision that we could make based on, Tommy and the administration's recommendations, without forming a full committee.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree, especially when their numbers down, we're talking about adding in, not taking away, so have at it.
There you go.
Well, I didn't mean to take up so much of your time. It's just, this is always so thrilling to discuss. So I want to make sure we actually
I
sat.
thought this was very exciting. This was very exciting.
When we start the process, you come sit with me for a minute.
Can I ask another follow-up question? You showed us where the areas of potential growth are, the greens and the yellows and that sort of thing. Knowing now, and this is probably just your opinion, so knowing now that Verrado itself is 15 plus years old, the area around Dorado Middle School and Dorado Elementary School, do we think that overall is going to be pretty stagnant as far as K through 8?
You know, what we're seeing now, because I was thinking that also, okay, 15 years, because this is my 20th year in the district, and I've seen it happen twice now. It's about every 10 years, we do a complete turnover. And the first 10 years I was here in Litchfield, we were on the old Litchfield Park was huge. Kids were coming from everywhere. And then started about 5 years ago, it started to drop off because they were older, graduated. We didn't have anyone, and now they're selling, moving into retirement, and we're starting to get more families. In Dorado, we're now seeing all those kiddos that were kinder and first grade when it first opened in 03 and 04. They're all now gone, they're in college, they're moving on. So we're getting pretty, I don't want to say stagnant, but what we're going to start seeing is those original homes, those original owners, the original Dorados, they're going to start looking for something smaller that's not so family, that's for them. And we're going to start seeing more families start moving back in. So we're going to see this uptick. And it's usually about between 8 and 12 years is where we start seeing this. Once that generational gap is done, it just starts. And Dorado we're 15 years in, you're absolutely right. We're starting to see it like this, but within the next 4 to 5, we'll start seeing it go back up with families moving in. Litchfield Park, like I said, right now, we're starting to see more families move back in. Rancho Santa Fe originally opened in like 93, 94. We've been through it twice with Rancho now. We're on a downward side. But there's more homes coming for sale, so we're going to start seeing an uptick over the next 4 to 5. It's funny that you mentioned that. It's an 8 to 12 year. We'll see this every 8 to 12 years with a community.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, moving on to item
Oh,
number 4.
Wendy has something real quick. I think she's got her answer.
Okay, sure.
So with the last capital plan from 2020, the School Facilities Board conceptually approved this for schools over the fall of 2027.
Okay. Thank you for checking on that, Wendy. Moving on to item number 5, update on superintendent performance-based compensation goals for the 2021 school year, and that is Superintendent Gunning.
Madam President, members of the governing board, been adding to my professional goals. As you had approved, there are 6 of them that we approved back at the end of July. Been adding some measurements. Of course, during this time, trying to blend in a little bit of items and work that we've been doing during what I would call COVID time versus also looking at things, and I can see that they'll probably measures, also action items that will continue to change and develop as we grow and move forward in each step. One of the things under student success that wanted to point out is the integration of the beginning work of our empowerment committee and those pieces, and really beginning at that very beginning stages, which we're at the just the starting block in that process, but really starting to monitor student discipline, student progress, and those pieces, and breaking them down by subgroups. Along with looking at, of course, all of the survey components that we have implemented over the last year and a half with student engagement surveys, employee engagement surveys, parent engagement, as well as our district services or customer service surveys as well, and to continue to maintain and grow in those areas. Also, with the continued focus on our retention of our teachers, we had a high retention rate last year. I do worry a little bit about this year. We still are in a teacher shortage when they just completed the statewide teacher shortage. It's lower than it has been even in the past. So it's something that we're definitely working on, and continuing to create the working environment, even in these unsettled times that our staff want to be at. Some of the things we've been working on from a strategic action perspective under student success, of course, is the creation and implementation of all of the committees. And we were really excited once we keep reflecting back on all of the work of our 20 committees that we had with over 125 participants, the creation of our AOI and the continued development of our digital learning academy, and what does that look like, and what will that look like in the future. That will be kind of can be a component component all on its own. Critical standards identification, that was something too. I mean, I think there's a lot of great components that have come out of this time of things we wanted to focus in and really narrow our focus and help hone in our learning. Critical standards was one of them, and have been working really hard on that. The beautiful thing, I think the next stage will be the alignment of looking at our benchmarks to see what was the impact of that focus, especially when our children come back. Did we see the impact of the hard work of our teachers? We are also still in the implementation phase of Wonder, grades 3 through 5, which seems so funny. It seems like eons ago when we talked about Wonder. And of course, again, monitoring those student subgroups and also in the people side of that component, starting the beginning training for our staff, as well as updating our board here in October too on all of that hard work. We will continue to develop and support our leaders and our teachers, working with all of their growth, their professional development is always going to be a continued focus. The self-care component, we know that that's going to be another critical piece this entire year as things tend to fluctuate and change in a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. Continue to work closely in implementing the strategies that Studer has trained us on, rounding with our principals, rounding with our directors. So kind of taking what we had talked about before, everything from the strategic plan and working it all the way down to where our directors and our leaders are implementing all the strategies and components within their departments and their schools. We've already met and done all of the goal setting with every employee that reports directly to me, and all of my directors have met with their employees. So that component, that initial kickoff has already started. We'll definitely still try to squeeze in that apple pie tour and continue our visitations with the campuses, as well as having you all come and visit. And I know that our principals really enjoyed that last year. That was a lot of fun for them. And even having him, tour Corte and Rancho just the other day, it just brings, they love to show off and they're really proud of their work. And so it means a lot to them. Meet directly with my executive leadership team, not only for our cabinet purpose, but for planning purpose, so that we're always trying to stay ahead of the game, and continuing to visit our schools on an ongoing basis. We are right in the final stages. John is wrapping up the empowerment committee and enhancement committee, and will provide guidance on what our committee structures will look like. We wanted to wait. I haven't started those because I felt it was only fair for that committee to finish their work and give me the recommendations of who makes up that committee, and so that I can take their input to move forward. Under service, one of the main components was parent connection and communication. And I think that another highlight that we had was really beefing up our communication strategies and components within our district as a whole during this process, and really making we had ongoing opportunity to improve, either on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis in those areas. And we're continuing to develop and grow within that, not only from the help of you all and just even providing guidance on reports and things that you would like to see from a district level perspective, but now Shelley and I are planning and strategizing on how can we do that from a district level, so that it is recognizable when someone receives communication from a district perspective versus a school perspective, and they know when to identify that and what it looks like, and see a common theme, common language, as we're one district, one family. And then of course, our ongoing commitment to conscious discipline and embedding those strategies. It's almost second nature now in all of our meetings, and then my ultimate dream will be that we'll have those strategies embedded in our board meetings as well. And then finance and resource, just working on all the different presentations and knowledge building that we can, and different modes of how we will grow that area in developing the knowledge of our stakeholders, all of our stakeholders, not only our employee stakeholders, but also our community stakeholders, especially as we go through. I feel like time, even more so now than ever before. And as we know, next year we'll be going out for our override. I think this is definitely the time to develop that understanding of how school funding really works. So I'm really happy for any comments.
Okay, I'll open the floor for comments, questions for Jody.
I don't have any questions at the moment.
I'm just thankful I got to get home right now.
Melissa, any questions or comments?
No, I just received the update, because I know we said we were talking about this before, so I'm glad that we got an update and,
Okay, I have a lot of questions, and this is not just because I'm gonna take my mask off. So because we went through the board goal process, it just really changed the way that I'm looking at this document now. And it changes really what I'm expecting to see here. So I have a lot of questions, but I just want you to know the reason why I'm asking these questions and wanting some clarification on these is really stems from that, because I feel like I've learned more about what I want to see the end result look like. And so some of these are just for educating me, and some of them are actually recommendations. So let's start with student success, since we normally seem to start on that side. So I feel like the annual goals, the foster academic excellence and the ensuring ongoing district-wide student-centered focus, are two separate goals, obviously. And I feel like when you look at the bullet points down below, that they fall into one of those two categories. So the student engagement survey, the district benchmarks, the discipline, site-based services, and the attendance all seem to fall to me under the student-centered focus. And the computers and the new applications seem to fall under the innovation piece for me. That's kind of how I look at it. So I'll just start with each of the measures, because the measures for me are what I want to understand, so that when we come back at the end of the year, at the mid-year, and at the end of the year, I'm clear on what these measures are that we're looking at. So for the student engagement survey, and this is true for all of the surveys, I personally would suggest that we break out the participation in a separate measure from the scores, because we've seen some low participation increased, but low participation, or lower than I would expect, especially on the employee engagement survey. So I would like to look at those two numbers separately when we actually look at the measurement. Does that make sense? Okay, so that would be a blanket for all of them: the student survey, the parent survey, employee engagement survey. I'd like to see participation be one measure, and then the actual scores be another measure. And then when we say scores, we mean any specific questions or just the overall score, or what do you mean by that?
It would be the overall scores, and it's that's calculated, from STEER that they calculate and then compare us nationally.
Okay. So that would be two measures: participation and satisfaction scores. Those would be numbers, basically. And so we're asking for those to increase from May of 20, or from last year, basically the last school year. Okay. When you say that we're looking at benchmarks and discipline rates by subgroups, what are those subgroups? Are we looking at race, gender? What are we looking at there?
So it'll be a mixture. It'll not only be race, but it'll also be gender. And then really looking at making an impact. One, balancing and the adjustment in those subgroups. Especially when you talk about race and ethnicity. And then looking at the growth in those subgroups of really kind of focusing in and really looking at those impacts. I see this growing even further of not only looking at, of course, just basic benchmarks, but also looking and identifying subgroups that participate in our different programs, such as traditional academy and those kind of things. But I feel like this is a good jumping off point to raise that awareness and start those initial conversations and identification.
Okay, so really the goal in this year is look at the data to identify maybe some gaps that we have, and then going forward, and maybe in the next school year, and then of course moving forward from there, you'll identify specifics within those subgroups that we'll take action on. Okay, okay. For clarification on the site-based services, I guess I thought we already had site-based services at all of our locations. Is that true?
We had, the last, were there 3?
So we added 3 this year.
Okay, so this is really, so by November 2020, really, it's already happened, so, okay, okay, no problem.
But I don't want to lose that, and the reason I always put this on, so I know this document has 2 folds, so this document is for you all, but it's also for me, my working document, and mine is a little bit more detailed, it's really down in the weeds, so to speak. But I like to monitor the progress of that, the number of usage, what's the value, what's the satisfaction, all of those pieces. So I'd like to keep it there, I just don't want that valuable service to ever go away.
Okay, one thing I will add, just as you're going through, because you're covering a lot of my questions too, so I'm going through. I think the difficult part about doing that, I understand what you're saying with it's a working document, but when we're doing actual evaluation template, which I pulled up while I was doing this, because we've struggled right through the last 2 times making this document work with the template document, and we've already evaluated based on that goal. So it should be part of the working document, but it shouldn't be part of the performance indicators for this year because you've already been evaluating on it last year. So I think we can certainly leave it on there, but I think I would make the recommendation that we wouldn't add it to the indicators again, only because we've already, created that as part of the evaluation for last year. Anyway, but it can stay, that's just how I'm looking at it when I'm thinking about how we're going to transfer this over for December. So.
Well, unless one of your measures for success is to say something like continued site-based services at every location. I mean, because maintaining and continuing to have those available is something that is district-wide student-centered focus.
And it should be, I usually always review the participation rate so that you know the volume of the usage as well.
Yeah, okay, okay. Attendance, I think, is great, especially learning more about distance learning and all that that's happening this year. Now, the other 2, the number of computers distributed and the number of new applications, to me, definitely speaks towards, as I mentioned earlier, innovation. And so what I'd like to maybe do or suggest is that we put more emphasis on innovation and we put more emphasis on planning rather than just the execution of the plan we have in place. For example, two things that I think would be awesome to add to this as measures for goals that are more future looking. Number 1, DLA. So developing a plan for DLA to be 100% school 17 and its own entity with its own principal and its own staff, and how we really want that to look over the long term. We know this year it happened quickly, and that's not necessarily, starting as we want to continue. So I'd love to see that being part of the measures here, is developing that vision for the Digital Learning Academy. As well, I would love to see the development of a plan to implement the one-to-one devices in the middle school. We obviously have distributed mini computers, and we know that's potentially one of the goals that we want to have. So if that is a goal, I'd love to see the actual plan, and it doesn't have to be executed this year, but just a plan in place to say, okay, over the next 3 years it's going to happen, or the next 2 years, or we need to put that into the next bond, or however, I'd like to see a plan. And so I feel like that would help to satisfy this innovation piece and really get us kind of beyond this current year, because this current year is so crazy, and I know it's hard to even think past what we're currently dealing with every single day, but I think we've got to start that process if we really want to move forward.
And we actually already have plans in place, so we just haven't.
Okay, we'd love to see those.
We're working on it, so we're already working on timelines of exactly what would the DLA look like, what's the timeline for hiring, what are our steps of all the things that we would do in a typical school, what's the timeline for when we open like the lens photo and looking at those. So we just started, we're at the very beginning stages, but we were already mapping that out and looking at how will we brand it, what will it look like, how will we market that, when it, as it comes to that.
Okay.
Which would be the first part of the year. And then the other part is definitely, I know, for Brad and his team, as soon as they kind of can get through this craziness, I know they are working on a technology plan, helping to sit down with all of us and Laura Films and Gina and mapping out like what does it really look like once he can get his head above water to even talk about anything besides the basic foundational pieces, then yeah, but those are all conversations definitely already happening.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm asking for, I guess what I'm asking for, and as a board we can discuss this, is, historically, this has worked in this way, where we might pick the goals and then you tell us how you're gonna execute those goals. I think I would like to have more of a conversation about what we want to see the implementation of the strategic plan look like, and provide more guidance as to what our expectations are, more than just we're working on that, or we're having that conversation. I'd like to see that be part of the measures here, is for you to deliver a presentation to us on the plan. Because part of it has also been communication. It is frustrating to me when I hear the answer is, we're already working on that, when you've never mentioned that to us. And so I feel like I don't know what's happening. And so part of the communication issues that I think we've had as a board, or I will say for myself, that I feel like I have had, is I feel like the trust is one direction. I feel like you don't, or occasionally, on occasion in the past, you wait to bring in the board until everything is done. And I think the 301 plan is a great example of this. Everything is done and then it's presented to the board, rather than tonight, which is a great example of how I would love to see more things done. Tommy coming and saying, hey, we're in the beginning process of this. What is it that the board would like to see for direction? So I think there's just some miscommunication there, and maybe some
What we
changes.
did with the going out for the AOI, and we talked many times, like this is a long-term goal that we would like to keep around. We don't want it to go away. That's why we didn't just do the digital learning plan with the governor, which we did, but we wanted this to be a long-term goal, but I don't have anything to present to you, so it's only when we're like ready, that we want to start talking through, which I could see like October, November, saying, here's our timeline of what we're thinking about for school 17, for transitioning this to a true AOI school and campus, looking at what our numbers will be like too, because we haven't stabilized yet of what will the size of that be, because we have to figure out that, to also figure out kind of staffing. But then to be able to tell you, just like we would with Lancetto, okay, we're going to be posting for new positions. This is what we think the staffing will occur. These are the grade levels that would be affected. Here's the leadership we think we'll need, and then we're going to begin, here's the timeline for posting the positions. Here's the timeline for determining when we roll out a name and bringing you a name to approve, because you'd have to approve a name, if we're going to name it a school and that kind of stuff. So that same process will occur here, but we're just at those very beginning stages.
And I understand that. I just would like to see that as part of our innovation. And really, if you're saying all this is being done anyway, then it's kind of a slam dunk. I just would like to see it in writing that, by May of 2021, we will have a full executable plan in place for the Digital Learning Academy to be as we want it to be going forward, and able to start that in August of 2021. Does that make sense, Jody?
I just like to say too, I think the hard part is what these goals are for the year. So it's hard to have a conversation. I'm with you, like, if you're working on it this year, it should be here, right? And obviously the DLA is gonna be a huge part of what you're doing, not today, but maybe, over the next 6 months, all of these plans are gonna come to fruition. But, as I'm looking at it in the evaluation for, midterm at the end of the year, if we didn't have anything in relationship to DLA or technology or any of these big, huge components that you're gonna be working on over the next 6 months, come the end of the year, we would have no way to measure your success on that, because it's not listed in your goals, even though it's something that's probably going to take a pretty good portion of your time, or at least thought process of planning out. So I would agree. I think seeing something, a big item like that on here would help in the evaluation process later on, looking back at what has been accomplished.
And I think we're just trying to figure out this system, if that makes sense, because it is a definitely very basic, and also been trying to figure out how do I incorporate the celebration of the hard work, because we worked for really an entire year and like 3 months into this. And I do this stuff. This stuff's important to me because of the hard work that goes into it, not because of the evaluation process. So I'm always proud of what it is in the end, but we're just trying to figure out how does this system work so that it's effective for us, because I also don't want to, I want it to be an interactive document that I'm using every day. And as you walk into my office, I mean, it's up there, our priorities that we never waver and never, spin from. So, but it is a working document, and it is definitely something that's hard to try to figure out when you're in an influx. You're working with basically a COVID school and non-COVID and in between and those kind of things, but also still planning, trying to plan and be ahead of the game.
Yeah, agreed. And that's why, yeah, I mean, I think it's a learning process. And I think that's where a conversation like this can really be helpful in helping us understand how you're using the document, and then also help you understand how we need to try to use this document as well. Because I appreciate all of the day-to-day hard work that's going on. And I don't want to put another thing on Brad's plate today to say, hey, Brad, come up with this one-to-one device plan. But I think that could happen by May. I hope that that could happen by May. So please don't look at it like this needs to happen tomorrow if it's on this list. It's just by the time we evaluate this entire year, I would love to see those 2 pieces of innovation actually have an executable plan in place, because that would tell me that we're making progress. I know right now, some of the things we're doing, we're really just trying to maintain the excellent standards that we already have, and I do appreciate that. But I think we've been looking at this now long enough that we can start evolving it kind of into how do we make this go to improvement and in specific ways.
Well, and I think what would be helpful too is that, I mean, this year's been weird, right? But what would be helpful is like in those meetings that we have, one-on-one, that we focus on this stuff and get that feedback, right?
Okay.
Because then that would be really helpful, because we do spend a lot of time together. And I know right now the priority is,
Yes.
it's hard to kind of talk about this stuff, but that would be really helpful of, hey, give me an update on X, Y, Z, or what's your thought process? Because it is hard when you have, your thoughts scattered everywhere to talk about, so I think that would be helpful to bring this up each and every time that we either have coffee, one-on-one, we have coffee, we have one-on-one coffee meetings, or sessions or times together.
I think that's a great point. And I think that really sort of goes to the point of it is a working document. I mean, these are the priorities that you've set for yourself. These are the priorities that the board has agreed that we have set. And that in that instance, these things are priorities to us. That planning piece is a priority. So I think it should be on here, but to your point, it should be sort of in those ongoing discussions about what's happening and, sort of checking in and things like that. So I think it's a great point.
Agreed. Okay, that's all I had on student success, and that's the most. The rest of this won't take very long. On the people portion, again, I'd like to break out that engagement survey into 2 pieces. That way, I think it's just more fair that way. And teacher retention rates, I think you could simplify that and just say teacher retention rates 90% or higher. I mean, I understand that 90% is a great rate, so I don't feel like personally that you would need to maintain the 92. I think 90% or higher is good there myself. And then for the participation rates in PD, I would like more information on this. So what that actually means. Are you looking at the total number of hours that are offered, the total number of hours that are taken? Is it average per certified versus classified? What are some things that we can actually kind of measure as success in participation rates? Or what does that mean? What does success in participation rates mean to you?
What's interesting is that, of course, there's part of that was career development, but that wasn't really my thought there. But was continuing on the professional development in all of the main strategies that we've had. How do we continue on? Because you're going to have to bring back and refresh and cadence. And I think it's powerful when we can show the number of employees as a whole that we've impacted with overall professional development in relation to our main initiatives, in relation to conscious discipline, So thinking of those large initiatives, as well as then, the ongoing PD, the extra PD, like I like to still monitor that for our new employees, the opportunities that they have to participate in those monthly PDs that are after, school hours, as well. So that's what my thought was there.
Okay, so you would want to look at conscious discipline and Kagan training, and so then you would look at
And then
how many
of course,
people, or?
Yeah, I like volume to see how many people impacted. So when I'm looking at it, like the conscious discipline, Kagan, wonders for 3-5, those kind of components that are affecting large groups overall. And then the new teacher, PD opportunities that we have. But being able to show, now new teacher, of course, those opportunities are by choice and not, mandated, but that you could see the volume of, did we impact, how many hundreds of people have we impacted, so that you could also, for me, it's also that continued development and implementation of the programs that we value, that are important to us, that it just doesn't ever slip away and go away.
Yeah, for sure. I think maintaining, since we have such a high participation rate in the first place, maintaining our participation rates is potentially a win in that area. I'm just having a hard time knowing, is that measurable? Like, what's the measure there?
I think you exceed the total number out of however many that are like in grades 3 through 5, how many people actually did we complete the training of all teachers in grades 3 through 5?
Okay. Okay.
In conscious discipline and Kagan, did we, meet our goals of training all of the grade levels that we expected? Some of that is the roll down effect, right? You train a higher level and then they go back and train on their campus. Did that actually happen? Did it occur? Because I think that's important.
Yeah, I think that's the exact data that would be interesting to see. So I mean, I think you have it. I think it's just not written here, but I think that data of, you said, did it meet goals? Right, that's the exact measure we want to see, right? What were your goals for, because, there's mandated PD and then there's just opportunities all over the place that people can take. This year's been a little different just because there's been so much extra needed, unfortunately, but I still think, we can take advantage of that in terms of the data and see the difference between what was mandated, what was not. So I think it's just a measurable data piece that's missing here, but it sounds like you have those goals set and they just need to be laid out.
Yeah, I mean, I love the end goal of that goal is exactly where we want to be. So yeah, I think it's great. I also really like the self-care lead that has been added. I think that's awesome. It's funny that you mentioned the enhancement committee because I had a question on what was the result of I call it meet and confer, but really the enhancement committee. And so you're going to make some tweaks to that superintendent's advisory council once you get feedback from the enhancement committee.
So they're wrapping up. They didn't get to wrap up at the end of last year, and I think we were hoping that we'd be back in person at the beginning of this year.
Yeah.
So they're wrapping up.
Understandable. Okay, the only area that I think I'd like to have a discussion on and potentially adding to this is the hiring, retention, and promotion by subgroups. Just in the work that I've been doing with the Diversity Empowerment Committee, there are some pretty obvious gaps there. Is there anything we could add to the goals this year, or do you really see us kind of trying to develop some goals this year that we would then be able to implement with new hires and that sort of thing for next year? Or when does that process need to start? Because we're offering contracts in the spring for the next year. Is there something that you think we could add there?
I see this year as, and you guys all chime in, but I see this year as raising awareness year.
Okay.
Because I don't know how far we can jump without that awareness. So we're just at that very beginning stages of kind of looking at some of the basic data and seeing where the gaps are. We've already started those conversations with our leadership group, and we know that we're an organization that likes to promote from within. So how do we support the hiring to support that development and growth in those areas?
And so is that possible, to make that a goal to say, training this year, the administrators or the department heads or something like that to actually happen this year so that we can start that process and not have to kind of wait on that? I mean, that seems pretty doable, but I don't know. I don't even know what the exact goals are that are going to come out of the Diversity Empowerment Committee. I feel like that's going to be one of them, but I don't know that for sure. I don't want to wait a year to get this started.
I think,
This is the beauty of the study session, Megan. You can just, don't even have to be on the agenda, just let it loose.
So I think that, Ms. Moran, that's a great point. It's something that our administrative team has been talking about a lot since we started the Diversity Empowerment Committee. And really we don't want to wait, but we also don't want to jump in and put the cart before the horse. We want to make sure that we are, just like Superintendent Gunning said, we're beginning the conversation, we're looking at data, we're starting to recognize, we're bringing in different people to talk with our leaders and just really start that discussion. But we really would like to wait till our Diversity Empowerment Committee truly sets some goals until we put a systematic plan in place. And I'm with you, I don't know exactly how that's gonna fall. Our facilitator, Amber Checkney, and I will be talking tomorrow a little bit more about that to see when can we expect concrete goals to come from that team so that we have a better idea as to how to proceed forward. But it's a conversation we're constantly having right now, that we know there's the district level work, but we have all these people on fire down here who are learning and growing. And like Superintendent Gunning has talked about, it's a lot like conscious discipline, how we rolled it out. We knew if we came in and said, here's what you're doing for diversity, here's what you're doing for diversity, it would get us nowhere. For conscious discipline, we had to begin the conversations, begin growing, begin thinking, begin looking in the mirror about our own practices, reflecting with our teams, and that's what we're really trying to do now, knowing that when you look around at our the representation of races in our schools, in our staff, we know we want to improve on that, but we want to really do it in a systematic way that jumps in, knowing what the data is, getting guidance from from Amber and from people from any town on how to do that correctly and do it right, and then rolling that out more so for next year, but as soon as we possibly can, and we'll know more when Amber guides us on the goals.
Okay, great, thank you, Megan. Could I just suggest that we take kind of the same bent as we did in terms of like the DLA, right? Like developing a vision and a plan, right? We don't know exactly what that plan is going to be because we don't have the data yet. More of just what is that plan? Because by the end of May, that plan will, not that you're going to have executed it by then, but you will have sort of that vision, because as we roll into next year, we'll have sort of all those data pieces. So maybe it's just maybe one step back.
Yeah, agreed. I think really probably the goal for this year is establish the committee and determine what the future goals are to tackle this issue. I just think mentioning it as something that we're working on and something that you're working on is important.
Right.
Okay, now on to service. Again, if we could break out both the parent and student engagement survey by participation and satisfaction. And then in the actions, so what I'm having a tough time with on this one, Jody, is the communicate effectively. And I know that's really kind of gray. That's going to be hard to actually measure. So I was thinking about what we had determined as board goals. And one of the things I think would potentially be measurable would be, you mentioned potentially a roadshow or one or more. You mentioned attending parent advisory council meetings. Could you possibly set a goal for yourself to say, okay, I'm going to do 3 roadshows this year. 1 will be for parents, 2 will be for staff, or some sort of actual like communication plan in that way. It doesn't have to be super complicated or in-depth, but and same thing for parent advisory council. I'm going to attend 1 parent advisory council meeting per semester or something like that. Obviously, your letters and messages go out on a very regular basis. I don't know that we need to dictate that. With COVID, they're coming out more often than they probably normally would be as well. But that would be my suggestion for that communication piece. So I'm not sure, I guess that would become a measure then, roadshows potentially, and then the parent advisory council. And then I would love for you to set a goal for yourself, and I know you've talked about it, to say, that we want to incorporate conscious discipline into our meetings. I say let's do it. Can you just set that as a goal that we're gonna incorporate conscious discipline into our governing board meetings, and you just teach us how to do that? Yeah, I think we should just do it. Anybody disagree? And then that's everything I had on service, and then on finance and resource. Again, it's very high level. So what I would like is, at this point, we're saying that we're going to deliver presentations to leaders, the superintendent's advisory council, whatever that's gonna look like, and on the website. I would like to up that a level to make sure that we're able to disseminate this information directly to all the teachers, parents, and community. I feel like because some of this is so technically specific, if it's like a teach the teacher type thing, some things can get lost in translation. So I know we've talked about this as a board before, but I would love for us to pick 3 to 5 topics. And Wendy, you don't have to do it yourself, but have someone, whether it's Shelley or Jody or Megan or Gina or whoever, do a super basic YouTube video, as basic as we can get it in layman's terms, on things such as teacher contracts. You know, what's actually in that contract? What am I signing when I sign that? 301 monies, the override, especially since we're having the override on the ballot next year. Let's get a little summary on what that is. What can we use that for? Average teacher's salary. I think there's some confusion as to what that number is, because we have teachers that say, that's not what my take home is, which is true. That's not what your take home is. Total compensation, including retirement, what they get as a retirement benefit that they don't see, but eventually will see, that is so beneficial to being a teacher in the state. M&O, what is M&O? How do we get that money? What does that mean versus capital? And then some of our other funding, food service and things like that. So not address everything, but maybe if we identify, 15 topics that we could address in a short informational video. And then for this year, pick our top 3 or top 4 and execute that, by May. Would that be reasonable, Joe, do you think?
So I think we identified a lot more than that. So we have the identification part done. We're just,
Okay, great. That's all the feedback I have.
That feedback has made me want to say something. I think that Kim is right. I think you've raised some really good action plans to measure the goals that you set, Jody, for sure. I was writing down a few things, we talked about the subgroups, and I know it had been raised what our retreat was about and how it was beneficial to the board and our community. And if I'm right, weren't we told by our trainer that to really delve into those subgroups would really be beneficial to us as a community, as a district, as a board, to look at everything that we've got going on. So the subcommittee, I just wanted to mention that was definitely something that was mentioned in retreat. Whether people think that it was important that we had the retreat or not, I believe that it was. The innovation measures that she spoke about, I think were great. Adding the PD information to the action plan. As far as diversity awareness, Megan, I know you talked about your committee and whatnot. And Gina, I don't know if you're aware of this, and I'm only mentioning you because of your affiliation with Agua Fria, but they rolled out a diversity training online within the first week before we even opened school that was put together by people within that district. I thought that was really enlightening. It was extremely raw, honest, and it may be something that you may want to consider taking a look at, maybe taking advantage of. I don't know if you had an opportunity to see it as a board member or if it was even shared with you. I tend to think that maybe it was not, but I thought it was an excellent piece to a puzzle that everyone's trying to solve right now. Kim, you talked a lot about wanting to be in on the conversation and feeling like Jody may be with her team bringing things to us. I think it's really apparent that there are 3 ways that something can run in this district, and that would be 1, with the district coming up with the ideas and bringing the plan to us, which is what we have done in the past. Meet and confer. That is the second way that can be done. It's the same thing as the district all getting together, only now we have staff members and volunteers that are coming together for their input. And then what I think you're talking about is maybe there are certain topics where you would like to see more of the board's involvement in the decision-making before it actually comes before us. And maybe that may be something that we look at our next retreat or another study session as to what are some of those hot topics that you or anyone else on the board feels like they would rather have a little bit more hands-on. Just something to consider in all of those rounds. That's it.
Thanks, Lane. I think those are good points. I will try and keep this brief. I think you went over several of the same points and the same questions that I have. I agree in terms of breaking up the measurements of the surveys, participation and the actual satisfaction score. I think the participation is important. We obviously want a lot of people to participate. You have less control over that than hopefully you do on the satisfaction scores. So, I'd like to see those broken up only because I think one would be more relevant in terms of, what you and the staff are actually doing. So I agree with that completely. I think we had a good conversation about the PD. I had the same similar, what are those measurements? We do this really well. And I think having that data and seeing the goals and somehow unbelievably beating them every year, right? I mean, it's a pretty amazing accomplishment. So I think that's great. Agree completely on the school funding for stakeholders. I think I think the video idea is really great. There's also some ways that, people don't even have to be on video themselves, right? We can just be going through a presentation or something. But I think what we will find, maybe one of the benefits of COVID is that people now are paying attention, right, to what's going on. Sitting up here, they're paying attention to what's going on at their school, what's going on in the community. Let's use that as a force for good, right? We haven't had that before. I think right now it feels heavy and a lot of times it feels negative, but I think we have an opportunity here to show exactly what this district does and what we stand for. And by communicating and being transparent, I think we're only going to bring more people into the fold, which is going to be a hard transition for all of us, but a good one, I think, and necessary. Just difficult to do all at once. So trying to, not bite off more than we can chew, but start the education process, I think, is important. So, and the last thing I will say is I wholeheartedly agree on sort of setting goals for ourselves. That's literally just developing the vision and developing the plan. I think there's no reason to rush to create something or to have all the answers. But to your point, being involved in that planning process is obviously informative to us, but I think makes it easier at the end of the day to understand where your recommendation is coming from. Because we've seen the planning process, or we've seen where you started in terms of your vision and then where you actually implemented that. So to me, I think that would be really helpful also. So that is all I have. Do you have any questions or comments? I know there was a lot to sort of take in all of that, but I think as a follow-up, what I could probably do, I took a lot of notes. I know, Kim, you have a lot of notes. Potentially, if you wouldn't mind sort of, typing them up or just sending them to me in a format that might be helpful, and I can share that, anyone that wants to modify or add or something like that. I think for the most part, these things will stay, but just to sort of round it all out and give that feedback in writing. So if you have anything, send it my way. I'll compile those and then send it to you, and then we can figure out how, what that working document looks like. Obviously, the goals and everything are set. It's really just the
measurable actions, which you already have.
Correct.
Now we can see them.
Correct, because the goals are set and those are done. Yeah, we're not moving backwards, we're moving forward. So,
And I think, I know what you probably could do is just have everybody type up what their feedback is and send it directly to Amy.
okay, sure. Direct feedback to Amy, and then she will make sure that Jody gets that other document is updated, and then we'll get the revised version of that. Thank you very much. Without any further questions or comments on that, I'm ready for a motion to dismiss us.
Okay, that's me. I motion that we adjourn. I second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.